Hey, what's up, and welcome back to the HK Rifle Works YouTube channel. Also, welcome to part 3 of the 1022 Precision Upgrade series. Now, if you've missed part 1 and 2, make sure you go review those videos. You're going to get a better grasp of the testing parameters, essentially why we're doing this test, and also a baseline of the 1022, as well as an action screw torque test. So you'll kind of see where we're starting moving into the ammunition testing, which we'll be doing here in part 3. Essentially what we've done is we've swapped out the barrel to an FJ Federson barrel. The 1022 got a upgraded trigger. It's the BX trigger, but Brimstone Gunsmithing did some work on it, lightened up the pull weight and everything. If you can see, the 1022 doesn't have the trigger group in it right now. I was getting the occasional hammer follow, so that had to go back to Brimstone. So essentially this is a stock 22 with a barrel change and a little bit of trigger work. We're going to be comparing it against the 457 that you see right below it, and we're going to be shooting RWS Rifle Match, SK Red Box, Federal Auto Match, CCI Standard Velocity, and CCI Mini Mags. So bear with me, I'm going to go set up some of these targets. It's going to be a lot of data and a lot of information, but stick with it. I think this will be some great information, and I hope you get something from it. Stand by. All right, so we're at the bench, and before taking a look at these targets, one thing that I wanted to make mention of is my new shooting range that I shoot at. Actually, they consider themselves a training facility. They have very strict video and media policies in place. So just a heads up, I want to get as much actual shooting and like live shooting groups to y'all as possible. However, just with the policies in place and me wanting to maintain a good standing at this is a premier shooting facility right next to my new house. So I need to be respectful of those policies, but I'm going to try and get y'all some good shooting content. Anyways, let's start taking a look at some of these groups. This is with the RWS Rifle Match. On the left here is the groups for the 1022. On the right here, this is the groups for the CZ457. So essentially what I did is I shoot a 10-shot fouling group, and then we'll just go read it like a book. So we'll go from left to right, from top to bottom. We'll start with the 1022, and we'll go to the CZ, and we'll follow this format for the remainder of these targets. Also, I wanted to mention, if you ever see some parentheses next to the group measurements, essentially I've measured these center to center, but if you ever see any parentheses, there's been a flyer, or there's like one dedicated flyer, and essentially I've just removed that flyer, and then I've given the measurement of the group without that one off. So let's get into it. Looking at the 1022 at the rifle match, this group printed 2¼ inches at 50 yards. I don't know if I mentioned that. This is all at 50 yards. So the center 7 looked pretty good here, but we had a flyer 1, 2, 3 with the flyers included. That was 2¼ inches. Our best 7 was 0.635 out of there. Now moving over to the top left group here, we printed a solid 800 thousandths group, or 8/10 of an inch. Moving over to the top right, we printed about 1.5 inches, but if we move this flyer here about 6 o'clock, our group shrunk down to just over 1/2 inch. Moving down here to the bottom left, we printed an 820 thousandths group. And then here on the bottom right, we ended up printing a 1 inch and 160 thousandths group, so just shy of 1.2 inches. And if we remove this flyer right here, we ended up printing 640 thousandths. So to compare with the 457, we shot our fouling group here. It printed 1 inch and 300 thousandths, so 1.3 inches on that. Starting at the top left, the CZ457 printed 1/2 inch. And if you remove this flyer that's dead center in the middle, it printed 375. Up here, it printed a 1/2 inch group at 530 thousandths. But if we remove this shot right here, it would print a 150 thousandth group. So that's in the ones. That's pretty solid. Next down here on the bottom left, it printed just under a 1/2 inch group at 425 thousandths. And then on the bottom right here, it printed another sub 1/2 minute group at 465 thousandths. So I'll save my comments for the end, but there's definitely some room for improvement on the 1022. I can kind of attribute some of these flyers potentially, and you'll see it on the next in the next targets as we kind of move through these. But I think a match bolt will clean that up. Maybe a bolt that has a pinned firing pin and can strike and make sure we get full consistent ignition. All right, so we're back and we're taking a quick look at the Federal Auto Match here. On the left, just like in the last groups, this is the 1022, and our center group here measured just over 2 inches at 2.2 inches and 140 thousandths, or 2.140. Our best 8 fell into 1 inch and 350 thousandths. So we were able to cut that a little bit by taking out, I think it was these 2 flyers right here. Moving over to the top left here, we printed 1.3 inches. We printed 2.6 inches here on the top left, top right. This flyer, for some reason, I mean, that's way out from this group here, but if we were to remove this flyer, it would go into an 825 thousandths group. You can't see the 1 here, let me move that. The group in the bottom left printed 1.690, so just over 1.5 inches. Again, this is all at 50 yards. And then this group here on the bottom right really tightened up. I guess the stars just aligned, but we ended up printing just under 7/10 of an inch group at 0.685. So like we said on the last group, definitely some room for improvement over here. But what really impressed me is the auto match from the 457. Our first group here, actually, let's take a look in the middle. Essentially what happened is this projectile is shooting a lot faster than the standard velocity or like the SK and RWS. So essentially we started printing high. Instead of shooting 10 altogether, I shot an 800 thousandth group up here to foul, and then I made a correction just so we can get close to these pasties here. And just a note as well, I'm shooting for groups, not for necessarily accuracy or just trying to hit this black dot. We're looking at groups now. But when I made the correction, we printed a 400 thousandth group. To make sure that we stayed consistent, I added these together, divided by 2, easy math, it gives us 600 thousandths. So the 10-shot Federal Auto Match fouling group shot just over 1/2 inch. Now moving to the top left right here, our group printed 740 thousandths. We had 1 little flyer. If we were to remove the flyer, it would be 440 thousandths. Our group up here, we printed 585 thousandths with 4 touching, 365 thousandths, and then right here we have 560 thousandths. But 3 of those shots were in 150 thousandths. So that's pretty good right there. And one thing that I want to just mention as well is instead of looking at just all these numbers, the reason I'm showing you these groups as well is so we can read the group, right? We can see, hey, do we have some touching and 1 out, or this, that, and the other? It takes a little to read the groups and just figure out exactly what your rifle's doing, but hopefully you can see, and this will give a good example of how the rifle is performing aside from just the numbers or group sizes alone. So let me put these targets up. Let me go get the next set, and I think we're gonna look at CCI standard velocity. All right, so I've got absolutely no idea what I was thinking, but I guess I didn't shoot a standard velocity group with the 457. That is one of my main just plinking and training ammunitions for positional shooting for the 457. I have a couple of groups that I shot, I don't know, maybe a couple of months ago. So these are the only reference groups that I have for the 457 in its current configuration with the standard velocity. Now with that caveat out of the way, let's go over to CCI standard velocity out of the 1022. For our fouling group, I noticed we had a lot of vertical right here. So almost a 2-inch group with a ton of vertical. Looking at the top left group here, it shot just over 1 inch at 1.190. Another 1.190 group in the top right here. 1.25 inches on the bottom, 1.25 inches on the bottom. So the bottom left and the bottom right were both 1.25 inches. We can say that it probably doesn't favor this ammunition too well, considering that we've been sub 1 inch and even some, 1/2 inch, 6/10 of an inch, 7/10 of an inch groups out of this gun. Maybe this will swap up and change up when we get a better bolt, when we get a better chassis or stock on the gun. But anyways, I just wanted to make mention that this probably isn't its preferred ammunition. Comparing this to the CZ, it printed about a 3/4 inch group at 0.765 and also a 620 thousandth inch group. So it shoots acceptably out of the CZ, but hopefully we can tighten these groups up with the 1022. Let's move on to mini mags. Okay, so for these last 2 targets here, we're gonna be looking at CCI mini mag through the 1022 on the left and SK match, the red box, through the CZ on the right. I didn't shoot the SK match through the 1022. I'll probably shoot it through once we kind of get everything situated, but the SK match is fairly expensive, and I usually save it for match days with my CZ. So I just didn't want to burn through any of that on any of this testing, but I will shoot it in the future. Let's take a quick look back at the CCI mini mags. Our fouling group was almost 2 inches at 50 yards, so that's pretty bad. We ended up printing just under a 2-inch group at 1.8. But if we were to move this flyer right here, again, that could be bolt related or some consistency related issue, we ended up printing a 640,000th group. So even though the whole group measured 2 inches, there's some good possibility here. Moving over to the top right group, again, this group was pretty bad at 2.5 inches or 2.59, almost 2.6 there. With this flyer, but if we remove the flyer, we ended up printing an 800,000th group. So kind of the same situation here. Again, we had another little flyer here, but we had 3 rounds touching. So could we get some promise from that? Maybe, maybe not. These 5, I guess the stars aligned and we printed an 840,000th group. And then for the bottom right here, we printed a 1.340. We had 3, 2 touching, 1 close to touching, and then 2 flyers out here. So definitely room for improvement here on the mini mags. Moving over to the SK rifle match. This is what I'm used to seeing with my CZ, this group here at 425. Let's actually check the foul group first. It's shot just under 1 inch. Right here at 425 thou on the top left, this is essentially what I'm used to seeing perform out of the CZ with this SK Red Box. Now, this is actually a new lot of SK Red Box. I'm still doing a little testing and shooting with it. I ran out of my previous lot, but I found a couple thousand rounds, and I ended up just picking that up. So this is a new lot of SK. And I noticed it was really weird. We printed up here on the top right a 1.025 inch group, so over 1 inch at 50 yards. That's not great. An 1.5 inch group here on the bottom left, which was crazy. And then a 640,000th group, but if I remove this center punch right here, the group gets down in the 400,000th range. But I'm used to shooting sub half inch at 50 yards with this gun. So I'm a little interested to see why it's performing like this. I'm really gonna have to sit down with this ammunition and test it and figure out exactly what's going on. Who knows? Like we said in the previous videos, it may not like this specific lot of SK. If you've caught those videos, I made mention that it's hard to take this as gospel. You know, 22s are fairly picky on ammunition. Some 22s could perform well with one lot of ammunition and then perform better or worse with another lot of ammunition. Same manufacturer, same line of ammunition, just the difference in lots. And then again, I can shoot 2 10-22s back to back, the exact same setup with the same lot of ammunition, the same brand, everything like that, and they could shoot astronomically different. So let's wrap this video up in the conclusion, and we will touch base on our final thoughts. So this will wrap up the ammunition testing portion of the 1022 with the FJ Feddersen barrel. Groups, just taking a look at the whole thing, they were less than stellar. I see it as room for improvement. The next thing we're gonna do is throw this 1022 in a KRG Bravo. I already have that on order. It should be here next week. We'll have to wait for the Brimstone gunsmithing trigger to return back from repair. Hopefully we don't get any hammer follows or any other issues out of that. And then also, once we do ammunition testing and compare the groups with the KRG stock to these groups, I'm thinking about picking up a Kid bolt and then a Kid receiver. So if you're interested in that, or if you're interested in seeing that, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Let's have a conversation in the comments. Let me know what you think. If you're shooting a 1022, what your modifications are, what groups you're seeing. Like I said, I was a little bit disappointed in what I saw today, but again, it's only improvements from here. So anyways, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you found this video useful. If you wouldn't mind, tell your family, tell your friends, tell your dog I said hi. We'll see you all in part 4.